You're listening to the Keep Optimizing podcast to increase your traffic, improve your conversion rates, and grow your profits.
Hello and welcome. If you're looking to improve the performance and return on investment of your marketing, then you are in the right place. I'm Chloe Thomas, the host of this marketing-focused podcast, and it's very, very cool to have you tuning in. In today's episode, I'm talking to Mark Hook about PR, because this month is all about content marketing. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about what the point of PR is, because I know a lot of you are asking that question. And we're going to be talking about how to go about doing PR successfully, what's important, how you can measure it, how you can optimize it. Yes, you can optimize it. Why relationship building with your journalist is just as important as understanding and working with your SEO team, is just as important as crafting the right story and bringing that emotional content. Mark is a master of his craft, and he's also really good at sharing it. So, at sharing that knowledge, that is. So, I think you're going to really like this one. We're going to meet today's guest in a moment, but before we do, please do check out the sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Klaviyo, the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for email and SMS messaging. Whether you're launching your e-commerce business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo gives you the tools to get growing faster. That's why it's trusted by over 38,000 e-commerce brands. Build your contact list, send emails that pop, and create marketing moments that build valuable customer relationships over any distance. Get started for free today. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Today, I'm chatting with content marketing expert Mark Hook. Mark is the Global Director of PR and Communications at digital operations solution provider Brightpearl. He's been in PR for over 10 years, working for content sites, hospitals, at a PR agency, and as global PR lead at e-commerce retailer Lovehoney. It's fair to say that Mark knows PR inside out. Hello, Mark.
Hello, what an intro.
Well, you did it all, so, I'm only writing what's true. But how did you get into PR? Because you've done it in so many different ways. How did you end up in the world of PR?
Yeah, it's a bit of a story, actually. So we had just sort of briefly spoke off air about the fact that I worked for a publishing company. And I had always had an interest in PR, and I wrote a press release actually to launch one of those websites, and it was one of the I got some very interesting feedback on the release. It was printed off with Post-it notes and red lines all over it.
You know it's bad when someone's added Post-it notes and not just red pen.
Yeah, there's not enough space on the actual doc to add the comments, so they bring out the Post-it notes. Anyway, so it was quite funny. So I sort of took it out that night to show a friend. It was Friday night. We were out on the town, and then I met with another group of people, and the wife of a chap there was actually PR director of an agency. So had got chatting, and then oddly enough, I obviously had the press release, so I showed it to her, and she liked it, which was obviously a huge boost of confidence, really. And what you know, she had an opening for a trainee PR exec, so invited me in, and that was my sort of foot in the door. But previously to that, yeah, it was very completely random. But previous to that, I had done quite a lot of sort of volunteering for PR agencies and work experience too. So I had built up the experience. I kind of just looking for an opening, and there's no a real clear track to working in a PR agency. No obvious route of travel, so to speak. So that's how I got in a pub.
It does require quite a lot of skills, doesn't it? PR, which you don't necessarily pick up unless you're actually doing PR. You've got to have the copywriting. You've got to get the marketing angle, make something that isn't at all marketing copy actually sell something. And it's a really complex set of soft skills.
It is, yeah. I always say that it's simple if you sort of know what you're doing, if that makes sense. So you kind of, it should be simple PR. Like if you have a good nose for a story, and that is fundamentally what you need. You understand what makes a story, and you understand that you are the kind of the relationship between journalists and the clients. So if you understand that dynamic, as well as being a good writer, and you can deliver interesting and engaging content, then those are the skills you need to set yourself up for success. So yeah, simple, but it's not really. And as you say, the soft skills, the ability to sell a story, that's obviously hugely important as well.
And you mentioned there that PR is about that relationship between the business and the journalist, was the word you used. In this weird and wonderful world we now live in, the edges of PR have kind of merged into SEO. They've merged into influencer activity, to social media, to content. So how do you define PR? Because it's still, I see, well, the reason I want to ask you this partly is because I see a lot of businesses kind of going, oh, we do influencers, so we don't need to do PR, or oh, we do SEO, so we don't need to do PR, or vice versa. So how do you define PR? Where's the edges that mean this is the bit that really is PR that requires that skill set?
When it comes to PR, to not recognize how important it is within that kind of overarching market mix is a bit of a disservice. PR certainly overlaps with SEO, it overlaps with content and influencers as well. When it comes to PR and SEO, I like to look at it as they both dovetail with each other. Both disciplines, they do work closely with one another, but they also strengthen one another as well. So when you look at what SEO does, it's a link building tactic, right? So you're looking to improve the visibility of the page and search engine results. You're looking to increase the traffic to a client's website. That's all well and good, but how do you do that externally? The end goal, I would say, of PR and SEO is the same. You need to have incredibly creative content. You need to give something of value that means that people want to link back to you, and that's where it comes back to PR. No one's just going to randomly link to your website or cover your business unless you have a good story to tell and a good story to sell as well. And I think that's where people maybe don't understand the value of PR. It's helping to build that relationship essentially.
As you mentioned about being the link between the brand and the journalist, and I think that's a part of it that gets overlooked a little. I think people, they think, oh yeah, PR, we write a press release, good or bad, covered in post-it notes or not, and we email that to some journalists and pray. Whereas actually, it's not just about building a list of people to send it to, it's about building a relationship with those people you're sending the press release or whatever it might be to.
Absolutely. I think I think you've touched upon something there, which first of all is I think undervalued in the world of PR, and it's media relations. Building that relationship with journalists. I think that's the one piece of advice I now give to all kind of newbie PRs is I always ask them, when's the last time you actually spoke to a journalist? and a lot of them haven't, like they just speak via email, or increasingly like WhatsApp and text message. But an actual conversation with a journalist is, again, like super valuable, and it's something that isn't, I think, being utilized to its broadest purpose. Because once you create and establish a relationship with a journalist, then that goes both ways, right? You can start to discuss story angles. You can start to look at what they're working on, how that fits in, and they're much more willing to cover your business in a more positive sense if they like you and they understand what your business does and you produce content that is of value to them. You're not just trying to plug your business. So that building those relationships are really useful, but I think you still get maybe too many lazy PRs that just want to fire over a story and hope for the best. The second part of that is understanding, again, what makes news. and what adds value, coming all the way back to influencers and SEO and all that good stuff. PR is a content driven exercise. It should be adding value, and it should be creating stories. When I talk about storytelling, what I mean, and this relates to e-commerce businesses, it relates to anyone you work with. It could be a hospital, it can be, a tech brand, but I always say, you have to tell a story. That's important. Otherwise, you might as well be advertising. You might as well just put a billboard up because you're not giving anything of value. What PR comes back to is offering engaging content that offers some sort of value, and that can be it doesn't just need to be a press release. That could be, a podcast. That could be an influencer relationship, a review, unboxing. You need to offer something either to the journalist or to the external audience that is of value. Just as an example of that is that Lovehoney, they most recently did a virtual Camp Lovehoney exercise, so a digital event where they offered the ability for people to tune in and listen to broad advice from a range of sexual experts, like wellness experts, offering lots of free advice and content, and that was great. Obviously, they wanted to get coverage from that event, and they invited media to come along and cover it. But first and foremost, they're offering value to their audience, right? And they're offering value to the journalists, whether that's educational, informational, or pure entertainment. And that's the business. And I think when it comes to PR, you can write press releases that say, hey, we want a deal. Awesome. But what it misses is, I would say, the three key elements of any PR story or any PR campaign. And that's bad news, topicality, and human interest. You need to have those three elements. That's what creates a story. So, when I came back to Brightpearl, one of the first things I wanted to do was talk about our transformation piece. So Brightpearl have had their own turnaround story. And, internally it was kind of like, well, why don't we talk about the positives? The fact that we're generating record revenues and we've increased bookings by 80% since the spring. And that's great. But people don't care about the sunrise until they've seen the sunset. So you need to take people on a journey, and you need to give them more than just the victory lap. You need to give them the struggle, and that always works well because it becomes relatable. So for Brightpearl, we talked about the fact that we had stagnant growth 4 years ago, that we didn't really understand how our product fitted with the audience we were trying to sell to. These are it's quite awkward conversations to actually talk about publicly. But what that does is it builds trust, relatability, and credibility. Because if you're willing to talk about that, people do start to believe in you as a brand. You're not just writing fluff pieces. And journalists also connect with you because they understand that you're willing to tell a story that is more than just your victory speech.
Well, yeah, and that their readers are more interested in reading it because, let's face it, we all like a bit of Schadenfreude. But we also all like to know how someone recovered from their problems, because the chances are we're probably going through some of our own. So there's kind of more lessons to be learnt from a recovery story than there is from a continuous growth story.
Exactly. And you've hit the nail on the head there. You learn more from defeat than you do in victory, right? And those are the lessons that are really important, and we shouldn't brush over those. And that's essentially what makes PR work. It is nailing down the bad news, the topicality, the human interest. And you look around the world today, what makes news? What drives interest? What drives, unfortunately, traffic and clicks and everything else? It is the negativity. Now there's nuggets of positivity in that, but first and foremost, it is negative. We're attracted to bad news elements. We're attracted to human interest. and that you can make that work for you in your favor. But that's why I think PR is such a useful discipline for a business to have, because it does help you to establish yourselves differently. So it can work so well at, yes, it's about creating brand awareness. It can help to drive referral traffic, but much more than some of those other disciplines we talked about, it can help you shape your positioning and your reputation, and use that to differentiate yourself against your competitors as well. And that's hugely valuable. I will say, if you're the business that's telling stories and you're sharing content, and that content can be educational, it can be entertaining, you build connections with your audience, and that's super valuable, because that's what keeps people coming back to buy, right? Not just the fact that they can trust you, but they like you. And that's what PR is for. It's for building that emotional connection.
So during 2020, we've seen more businesses than we normally would connecting with the emotional side and admitting what's going on behind the scenes, either because they're enlightened enough to realize it would be a good idea, or because the shit hit the proverbial fan and they had no choice. But do you think that means we're heading towards, especially when it comes to retailers who are loath to reveal what happens behind the scenes? Traditionally, they're one of the worst. Sorry, guys out there, but you are one of the worst businesses for revealing what's going on. Do you think it's going to lead to more success in the PR space, I suppose, for businesses, because they're getting into that habit of flexing those muscles, of admitting to what's going on, of revealing the humanity within the business?
Yeah, I think it could do. It'll be very interesting to see. I think what happened initially when a lot of e-commerce retailers couldn't sell is they went very heavy on brand values and starting to talk about the brand, starting to share content, real sort of content marketing focus, which is great. It'll be interesting to see if that lasts. I think what we need to do is really summarize the benefit of opening up for companies. And it's not necessarily on the conversion side, but it's on the repeat business. The cost of acquisition is so high for e-commerce retailers that they need to build return buys. And the best way to do that is obviously provide a fantastic experience, but it's also to get people to buy into your culture. And to buy into a brand. And you can't do that if you don't share who you are and the story behind your brand. If you're very closed, then it's very hard to be loved, right? And businesses that are more willing to open and acknowledge both their faults as well as their victories, those are probably the ones that will connect better with their audiences and have more longer term success.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because they can obviously do that by blogging on the website, then they can do it by sending better email marketing communications. But if they really want to maximize it, they want to make sure that when their customers are opening the relevant press, that they're also seeing that same openness being reiterated there. Because if you hit people in multiple times in multiple places, you have that bigger impact. I guess that's where the power of PR really starts to impact.
Yeah, and that's where it dovetails with SEO, right? I always say that you can't sell unless people know who you are, right? And what really builds credibility, what really does build credibility, is being seen in multiple locations. So if you can start getting editorial placed, and we all search online, right? If you search for a pair of shoes, if you start to see, Parker shoes mentioned in various different places and articles, without even reading those articles, you start to build a level of trust in that brand. It's much the same way with online reviews. You will probably trust a brand with 7,000 reviews, even if 8 of those are negative, than you will with someone with just 2 reviews. And you're probably more likely to buy from the company of 7,000 reviews. Why? Well, more people have bought from them. And that works much the same way nowadays with PR. It's about building multiple opportunities to be seen. And if you look at it very tactically, that is what the job of PR is. In a digital age, it's building opportunities, building brand awareness. It's getting companies linked higher up their search engines, but in multiple places. So that builds that trust, that credibility, and ultimately persuades people to buy.
Yeah, which is exactly why people put all the logos of the places where they've been featured on their website, because it has it has another impact there. But look, Mark, that's been a really interesting stroll through the world of PR. I'm sure we've convinced a few people to add it into the mix, and hopefully we've convinced more people to be open. But we're now going to pause for a reminder of our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about the wider world of content marketing. It's safe to say that most of us have been doing more shopping online lately. And if you're an e-commerce brand, that means you might be seeing more first-time customers. But once they've made that first purchase, how do you keep them coming back? Well, that's what Klaviyo is for. Klaviyo is the ultimate email and SMS marketing platform for e-commerce brands. It gives you the tools to build your contact list, send memorable emails, automate key messages, and more. Way more. Whether you're launching a new business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo can help you get growing faster. And it's free to get started. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Okay, Mark, so far we've gone deep into PR. Now you get to wow us with your insider knowledge about the whole world of content marketing. So for the following questions, your answer can be anything to do with content marketing, which of course does include PR. So Mark, you ready for the insider tips?
I am.
Okay, let's start with content marketing newbie advice. If we've inspired someone to take that first step with content, what do they need to know to give themselves the best chance of success?
I think when it comes to PR, it really is about knowing your audience. So as soon as whenever I take on a role within the PR space, it's looking at how much data have we got about our customers, our audience, because that's how you basically build the cadence of your storytelling. And you just get so much insights because the data about your customers, that gives you the ability to look at trends, that gives you the ability to look at opportunity, not just in PR, but in SEO and in other sides of the coin, influencer marketing. But you need to really understand what your customers are looking for and what the trends are from their perspective. So I look at data. I typically will speak to customers from a pure Brightpearl perspective. I spoke to 10, 12 customers off the bat to really find out why they were using the platform, but actually what's going on in their space. And from that, you can get a picture of what is going to resonate with a wider audience. So that would be it's a very obvious thing, but that would be my first go-to is just understand who you're speaking to in your audience. And I'm not sure enough people do that.
Well, they certainly not enough pick up the phone and speak to them. She says, thinking how little she speaks to her actual listeners. But I speak to a lot anyway. Anyway, enough of my problems. Okay. Once you've started, of course, you've got to keep optimizing. So what's your favorite way to improve content marketing performance?
I'm going to go back to PR again and talk about the PR's kind of fraught relationship with measurement. And again, I think this is it's related to everything, right? But I really want to nail the measurement side of things, because we have always had a bit of a fraught relationship with monitoring the performance of PR. And I'm not talking like PR value, AVE, how much would you have spent on an advertisement. I'm talking about the actual value of PR. And there's tools out there now that can really help you understand how you're tracking your messages. What's landing, where it's landing. Is it landing on the type of sites with high domain authority that's actually going to translate into search engine and direct search benefits? Are you connecting? Is your stories connecting? Is your share of voice increasing over time? That sort of stuff. Getting a real quantitative and qualitative idea of the success of your PR performance over time. Like I said, there's tools out there that can do that, but it can help you now really paint a picture of success for PR, which I would say probably wasn't there maybe 5 years ago, but now it really does help. And you can you can, people that are using the right tools can stand proudly next to other sort of disciplines and say, well, actually, we can see the benefit of PR on search. We can see the benefit in terms of referral traffic. We know that our share of voice over time is ticking upwards. We're at 20%. At Brightpearl, we've seen our share of voice against our competitors. And sorry, when I say share of voice, I mean share of kind of the coverage that you're earning in media compared to your competitors. You can track that. So you can really see how your brand awareness is increasing over time. And that's like hugely valuable. So I would say, get that sorted, and don't be afraid to monitor, because it can help you plan your activity, make adjustments, and hone your strategies.
It's as simple stuff as if you see that one particular outlet is coming up again and again and again, and you've never actually spoken to that particular outlet. There's a really good hint. Go and have a chat with them. Find out why they like you, and because clearly they're up for doing more, aren't they?
Exactly. We had a piece of coverage that landed on, and it was like a tech blog. It wasn't one of our. It was like an outlier kind of target for us, but it drove huge amounts of social shares and also traffic back to Brightpearl, and it was kind of it was like a 5 great inventory management solutions or something like that, like a listicle type piece. But it had huge impact. Now, we would never have known that. We would have just been like, oh yeah, we were on this blog. But actually, we saw the value of it, and we were like, well, let's make them a target, because you can see the impact. And also, then you're like, brilliant. We'll continue to work and hone the relationships we have, because what we have found, and just as an interesting aside, is that you can start to narrow your field of vision, and we always we want to be on tech websites, we want to be on in the industry retail trades. Like, everyone is just reads that, right? Like, now,
Yeah.
now our typical audience, they probably don't actually read a lot of these titles, or they certainly don't just read those titles. So we didn't want to limit ourselves. And what we found is, like, regional coverage was getting shared. We were getting tons of traffic from regionals, both with Lovehoney actually and with Brightpearl. So we were like, well, let's double down on those areas. Let's start sharing case studies of companies we work with, retailers that are from, I don't know, Huddersfield, and start building more profile from that. So we started to implement new tactics and approaches, because we were seeing the impact of PR in different media outlets than we maybe would have initially expected. So measurement, hugely valuable.
Love it. And that brings us on nicely to the next of the insider tips, which is that it's impossible to improve our marketing unless we're monitoring the performance. But the list of stuff we can monitor can be overwhelming. So what for you is the number one content marketing or PR KPI? What's the number you look at, Mark?
Oh gosh. So I think it does depend on what, I guess, whoever you're reporting into your board, what their value is, right? Unfortunately, they can educate, but I think that there is you can create loads of different measurements and metrics, but and I have done that, and it's and not at Brightpearl, but at different companies, it's been, well, yeah, but what does that mean when it comes to AVE? So there's that. You have to kind of, first of all, create the metrics and the measurements that are seen and considered to be valuable, whatever those are. And then introduce others over time. So for me, I think what I see as being the most valuable is our average domain authority. So where, if we're placing highly on well-ranked websites, we know that's going to have a tangible effect on our search rankings over time. So that's huge for us. That's a real measure of success. And then share of voice. Are we crushing it when it comes to earning more coverage compared to our competitors? Because at a very high level, if you're in more places, you're more likely to be seen from your competitors, right? And if you're in a buy-in mode, that is an advantage, a massive competitive advantage. So, if you see Brightpearl over someone else and you've seen them 5 places, and, you have much more opportunity to see Brightpearl first and foremost. And then when you're looking at the fact that you've seen Brightpearl in various different places, you go, well, you just, again, it comes back to that review example. You start to lean towards them just because the trust is there, right? Or the familiarity is there.
If you see, whether you're looking at, you're seeing articles about SaaS companies or retailers, if you see it in multiple places, then it's that drip, drip, drip effect that gets the consumer to move. Okay, finally, it is crystal ball time. What's coming up in the next 6 to 12 months that we should be getting ready for in content marketing?
I think the next year will be very, very digitally focused, obviously, because of the pandemic era is going to be here for a while. But I think we are moving to a digital world primarily anyway. When it comes to content marketing, I think from a PR perspective, SEO perspective, and content perspective, we'll be working much more closely together. I think if you're a PR and you're not designing campaigns, strategies, and approaches in line with SEO and almost a PR for SEO approach now, then you are massively missing a trick, because it should all be aligned. And increasingly, I look at PR as being a very much a digital activity, and sitting in that park alongside affiliate marketing, social influencers, and SEO. And we should be happy to be sat there. So I think a lot of where PR will be going will be looking to support those other disciplines and functions, and helping e-commerce businesses, but other businesses outside of that sector, in terms of just enhancing their digital strategies.
Nice. Mark, we have learned a lot from you today. You mentioned Brightpearl a couple of times, and we should really let the listeners know where they can find Brightpearl if they're interested in taking a look at all the coverage you're getting. So could you let the listeners know where they can find you and Brightpearl on the web and social media, please?
Of course, yeah. We are brightpearl.com. If you just stick us into Google, you'll see plenty of articles come up about us. And also on socials, we are Brightpearl HQ.
Excellent. Well, look, Mark, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a revelation to me, actually, just how close PR and SEO now are, in a friendly way as well. And the level of tracking that it's now possible to do. That's really fascinating. So thanks very much for coming on.
That's okay, no worries.
So a really interesting look into PR there with Mark, who is clearly very good at PR and good at explaining it too. I loved that the 3 key elements to get into those press releases: bad news, topicality, and human interest. I love that phrase he used as the justification for it, as in people don't care about the sunrise until they've seen the sunset. So getting those, being honest and talking about how things have gone from bad to worse, or in the case of products, talking about the problem that your product is there to solve. There are so many ways of doing it. You really do have to get your kind of creative brain on to do so. If you are wondering how to work out who you should be building those relationships with, in terms of where you want to get people talking about your PR stories, then have a listen to the last episode we put live, which was episode 24, where I'm chatting with Rand Fishkin from SparkToro, all about how to go about finding the places you should be trying to put content. And he's going to talk about the SparkToro tool, which is a very cool tool, which you can use for free as well, or so to a certain level you can use for free. So that's enough to get you going. And the other thing I thought was quite interesting was how Mark was so keyed into the world of SEO, and how, when he said about his KPI, average domain authority of the places they're getting mentioned is a key KPI for them on a key PR KPI. Are we getting mentioned on high quality sites based on domain authority? Really interesting way of looking at things. Now, you can get links to everything we discussed, the full transcript of the episode, important notes, and much more at keepoptimizing.com with an S.Z. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Keep Optimizing podcast. This month is Content Marketing Month, and we are skipping the webinar, which gives you time to listen back to your favourite episodes or to scroll through the back catalogue and listen to any Keep Optimizing episodes that you've missed. Next time, we're flipping back into the world of own site content marketing. So make sure you come back to join us for that. And please do tell your fellow marketers about the show, because I want to help as many marketers as possible to improve the performance of their marketing. So if you know other people who are planning great things with content in 2021, with their on-site content strategy or their off-site content strategy, then make sure you tell them about these episodes, because I know they're really going to help them. Well, look, you have a great week, and make sure you listen to the next episode so I can help you to keep optimizing your marketing.
Access everything Keep Optimizing at keepoptimizing.com. That's with an S, not a Z.